and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host, Lei Xing, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, good evening. This is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. This is episode number 60. I hope you had a nice tomb sweeping day holiday break. 3-day break? So you have a short week this week. I know Cyber Rodeo is coming up in the top of the hour, so hopefully we'll be done by then and catch some action down in Austin.
Yeah. It's exciting, man. It's exciting news, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting, concerning what's going on in Shanghai. It's been shut since, Giga Shanghai has been shut since March 28th, I believe. Quite a long time by Elon's standards. So recently we reached a milestone of 5,000 downloads for our podcast. Which
nice.
Officially, we published our first one on May 20, 2021. So we thank those loyal listeners and people who've downloaded and listened to the show. Big thank you. Couldn't do it without...
Yes, thank you.
Without all the people, tuning in. Today, episode number 60, it's opening day here in America for baseball. Masters this week, Australian GP, Grand Prix this weekend in Formula One, so shaping up to be a nice week for sports at least.
I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second. All the rest of the world has moved on from COVID, and we are still here. I think China pushed it out 2 years, basically.
Well, you're in Beijing, so you're okay for now.
Safer.
For now. Just, that's the key word. I listed basically it's, I'm not going to go through the headline details, but the topic I listed in the space's name, March EV sales, BYD, Volkswagen, Polestar, Hertz, Smart today, obviously Tesla. That's the topics. Where do you want to go first?
First, I want to congratulate Gogoro.
Yeah, I saw that.
For IPOing earlier this week. Horace, Bruce, and team, good job with that. I know that there was some anxiety from the team, and for the sake of full disclosure, the CFO, Bruce Aitken, he was interviewed by CNBC this week, so have a look at that video. But he's a buddy of mine from Beijing days, and so the next beer is on him.
Oh, that's really close, you guys. So
yeah, so before he moved back to Taiwan, a quick story about him. He actually grew up in Kaohsiung. His parents are Scottish missionaries. And so he grew up there, went to uni and grad school in the US. He's American. And then he moved back to Asia, basically, to take on leadership roles in Intel Finance. So he and I this is about 4 years ago, we're playing on the same AmCham basketball team. Oh. and he's telling me this story about interviewing for this company in Taiwan. And I was like, oh, sounds like a great opportunity. And so anyways, long story short, super happy for them.
Well, we should get him on the max if possible. I mean, it's relevant. So
yes, I will do that. I know we've been trying to do that behind the scenes, but with the IPO and the SPAC, he's just been slammed. But exciting time for them.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're a company to watch for sure.
It makes me think of all the power bank sharing that was quite popular a few years ago in China, right? For mobile phones.
Yep.
right? But anyways, March EV sales, we really can't talk about March EV sales without talking about BYD. So they're pretty much one and the same, right? And what BYD announced, ending production of fully ICE vehicles and 100,000, 100K club, as we say here in China EVs and more. I just felt everybody got out of Q1 like safely, and now confronting this Q2. So Q1 really, it was okay.
And let me add to that, Lei, that statement that you made safely. I actually think if we look behind the scenes, they were working their butts off to get that.
Right.
I don't think it was easy to actually get that safe number. Right. So, and part of it is also that it was just historically a slower quarter in the year.
Right. And BYD is just, I mean, I had some doubts about them doing 100,000 in March because of the, but they did it, they did it. So congrats to them. That's a psychological milestone for them. And right, if you look at the rankings, they're far head and shoulders above, right? Everybody else, and they control their own destiny. That's the bottom line. And
I want to talk about how the China EV story has evolved from Tesla's coming, Tesla building a gigafactory, Tesla's building its sales volume, to wow, what is this $4,000 Wuling Hongguang Mini EV? And so it shifted from Tesla to Wuling, and then now it's BYD's story. So that's how quickly things happen. And that's happened over a 2-year period, essentially, right?
Yeah. And, speaking of BYD's announcement, I think, first of all, the way I look at it, obviously it's a huge PR win. And second, what's so different about BYD is this is not some company that talked the talk first and said, I'm going to do this by a certain year. BYD has never announced anything pertaining to, let's say, 2030, I'm going all electric. They just did it when the time came. They just did it. I think that says something about, BYD. And this is 14 years in the making, right? 2008, the F3 DM was launched as probably one of the world's first plug-in hybrid. 2006, when they had the F3E, a concept with their LFP battery. So this is 16 years ago. And 2003 is when they acquired Xi'an Qingchuan Auto to move into the auto business. So this is 19 years ago. And 1995, when Wang Chuanfu founded BYD, was supplying batteries for Motorola and Nokia.
Everybody else.
And the way they did it was because their batteries was half as cheap as everybody else. And so if you look back to the history and see where this announcement that came this week, it just everything was natural, right? It just happened at a certain point in time. They were ready to move to the next step. And it wasn't like something that was announced, I'm going to do this by a certain year. It just happened naturally. I think that's the significance of it.
Not only that, Lei, because BYD's story is amazing. And I think you've summarized it really quickly with that one missing piece. It's amazing how Warren Buffett knew way back when 2008 to invest heavily into BYD, because that's why Warren Buffett is who he is, right? Just for him to have the foresight and the determination to stay with BYD even during the tougher times, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, over the last BYD's plug-in hybrid technology route, it's been scrutinized all these years. It wasn't smooth sailing, but they stuck to it, right? And now with the DMI is basically they're making this technology the next ICE, basically, right? So that's why they no longer need the ICE, and that frees up capacity because their DMI demand is huge.
Yes.
And
one other thing that I need to point out that about is the fact that their for the two most important commodities on electric vehicle, they're vertically integrated. Okay, so all of the legacies are
Yep.
currently looking at moving away from just in time, bringing battery cell research and development, and bringing chip design in house. BYD is already doing it. It's OG,
Yep.
right? So
It's proven its model that everybody's doing what BYD has been doing, or trying to do what BYD has been doing. That's right.
we have to remember that as BYD scales, as they start building more products internationally, then they're going to have to evolve as well, right? We're not saying that the system and the processes they have in place currently will always work and optimize production, optimize margins, optimize output. So they'll have to evolve too. But what we're seeing is that the legacies are moving away from just in time because of the global issues and the reset of the entire automotive industry to EVs when BYD was already kind of doing it. And then Tesla came in and is doing it as well, right?
Yeah. You mentioned about margins. So we give credit where it's due, but we criticize where it's warranted. So I think the downside for BYD going forward is if you look at their annual report, their margins got hit compared to 2020. If you look at the numbers,
Yes.
pure margin numbers, I think it was down quite a few percentage points. Now, obviously, BYD, like everyone else, is also exposed to the raw material prices, right? And you can't get around it. And even though it is highly vertically integrated, but it showed in the numbers. And right, Geely and Great Wall, these BYD, these three, if you compare their profitability, BYD is not doing that well. And BYD does also depend a lot on the subsidies as well. Obviously, they have more volume, but these are the things that going forward, BYD has to figure out, right?
To piggyback off of your statement about the subsidies, there were a couple of years, I believe, 3, 4, 5 years ago when BYD was generating $1 billion.
Yeah.
Off of those subsidies. So they're no different than the other automakers when it comes to that stuff. Yeah. And actually, I would argue that on the margin, they're actually more sensitive because most of their vehicles are under 250,000 RMB. So any material pricing increase is going to cut into their margin a lot more than a premium brand's margin because they can eat some of that, right? And so that's where scale, the laser focus on really understanding and figuring out that whole risk management from a global standpoint is going to be helpful for a company like BYD.
That's why I was saying earlier that this ending production of ICE vehicles, to me and maybe to BYD itself, it's really insignificant. Because it's just a natural. Their development has reached that point that they can do that. It is a PR win, but it's not something that was forced that they had to do this on a certain date. It is just natural, and now.
Yeah, right? And I'd said that to Danny Lee. I was quoted in
the Bloomberg,
Bloomberg, interviewed by Bloomberg, yeah. And I said this is mostly symbolic,
exactly,
and I pointed back to your chart, right? Getting away from ICEs was happening years ago,
right?
Okay, and this is just like making it official, and I almost feel like it was also a poke at some of the legacies saying, you guys are talking about it, we're getting it done, right?
Yeah, walking the walk versus talking the talk,
Yeah, and the other thing too, and I got an opportunity to talk to our good friend Nori, and last week I told you guys I had that Li 1. I picked Nori up and we drove around and he was very impressed, pretty impressed with the Li 1 as well. But, we started talking about BYD and one of the things is some of the challenges that BYD is going to have moving forward, especially as they enter foreign markets. I told Nori, and you know this, BYD is kind of cheating because they already have international operations. We should remind people that they build electric buses in Lancaster, California.
They're an American company, virtually.
Yeah. So whereas the Chinese consumer is still much newer to cars in general, European consumers and American consumers expect a certain amount of reliability, fit and finish for their economic vehicles. And so we've seen significant improvement in the quality and the fit and finish of their vehicles. So if they can maintain that, they're going to be fine in Europe and the United States. But if,
this is a perfect point to move to smart, and to your comment earlier, and just now about quality. And the interesting observation on the smart is that Geely has done the unthinkable. Their smart, Polestar, Lotus, the next generation vehicles are all going to be made in China for the world, right? That's I think when we talk about the smart in the new age and utilizing Geely's SEA platform, Mercedes design, made in China for the world. That's the symbol for.
But I'm gonna give probably a little bit of an unpopular take, because I believe with everything that's happening in the world and the negative connotation that globalization, that word, carries nowadays, I don't know if Geely's going to have to be manufacturing locally anyways if they want significant share of the European market or the US market. And so I think a lot of that Chinese capacity is going to end up being consumed domestically. And then as they gain momentum, because they're effectively new brands, right? Because Lotus is kind of rebirth, Smart is kind of rebirth as EVs. And so that domestic market, the domestic Chinese market, should be able to take up 100,000 units or 150,000 units of Lotuses, no problem, right? And it'll help them dip a toe, just like NIO, just like XPeng, shipping from China for the initial couple of years until they get a critical mass of demand. Then they really have to start looking at greenfield sites in Eastern Europe, in the UK, in Germany. So we have to remember that. And the one thing that just triggered in my mind is Geely is truly China's first global automaker, right? With all these global brands that they have. Kudos to them.
And Polestar and Hertz, another one of Geely's brands. I just think for Polestar, I mean, I've had the personal experience of renting a Tesla Model 3 on Hertz, and I'm just thinking Polestar is going to be an entirely different experience if I were to rent it. And the killer is the charging part of it, because I don't have that peace of mind anymore. Right.
And it's KISS. You got to keep it simple, stupid, right? If you want people to rent it, it's got to be easy.
And the reason why Tesla was put on Hertz, I think, is a lot different than why Polestar is put into Hertz. I mean,
the one thing I will say, Lei, when I saw that announcement is God bless them, because now they've sold, a third of their capacity, which takes a little bit of pressure off. But because they're not selling well in China, that they're not selling well in the United States. And let's be clear here. If they're shipping, so I'm not sure if it's Polestar vehicles or Polestar 2s, because
for now, I think.
Yes. So in the contract, it's got to be able to shift to maybe the SUV in the United States.
Well, the Model Y is getting onto Hertz as well.
Yeah, because they can't ship Polestar 2s from China to the United States because there's a 27.5% tariff.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to be sustainable. So are they going to start building, eventually start building Polestar 2s locally in their U.S. factory?
Well, Polestar 3 is in South Carolina, right? So
yes. So that would make sense. I don't see that tariff being lifted. Let me just say that. And the other thing, to your point about not the same UX, for Polestar versus a Tesla when you rent at Hertz. The other thing is, remember that Tesla has this reality distortion field where selling fleet cars into a rental agency is actually a cool thing for Tesla. I don't know if Polestar is going to have that reality distortion field.
I guess it's now becoming more cool for these EVs maybe to get onto Hertz. I mean, it's a rebranding of Hertz itself, but I don't know. I mean, if I get a chance, I mean, it won't be available until later this year. But if I get a chance, I'm definitely gonna rent one, like what I did before with the Tesla.
The other thing I want to mention is that this creates more options for Hertz if they want to become a subscription service as opposed to just a rental agency, right?
Right. Volvo does that subscription thing. I don't know how it's going, but...
Well, Porsche is the only one that I think has kind of stuck with it because they're able to, the subscription cost is really high.
Right.
Because if you have all these inventory and you need this car for this month and this car for this month, we're carrying it on our books. And so unless you're getting that subscription fee pretty high, it's not paying for those cars on your books, on your balance sheet. So
yeah. And I listed Volkswagen because I didn't feel like this was reported that much in the Western media. So that decision to invite these 20 Chinese tech companies to be suppliers, not of the vehicles next generation SSP produced for China, but for the US and European markets. And this announcement, I think, came right around when the China's Securities what's the CSRC, right? Announced,
yes, CSRC,
right, when they announced that we allow these Chinese companies to have the freedom to select where they want to IPO, and that new rule that they announced. So I felt like Volkswagen really throwing down the gauntlet. I mean, this is like open, I'm going to have Chinese tech companies being our suppliers for the SSP for the European and US markets. This is very sensitive.
There's a lot of,
right?
There's a lot of risk on that.
That's how I felt. But
and and
I'm sure, Huawei is going to be one of those 20 companies. You can bet.
Yeah. Well, and we should note that Huawei is designing their own chips now, and they're going to be launching a set of mobile phones. So the irony of that statement that you're talking about for Volkswagen, Lei, is that there was that article in FT a couple of weeks ago regarding Volkswagen. And there's another article this week in the Wall Street Journal about how the head of sourcing is now going to go away from just in time to local sourcing to mitigate the wiring harness issue. Okay. So that is probably part of the announcement that you're talking about, using Chinese tech suppliers, right? And they did say that they're going to try to double market share in the US from 5 to 10% for Volkswagen brand. And the ID4, I feel, is probably the perfect electric vehicle for these Americans that aren't as tech savvy as the average Chinese consumer, okay? That don't have a lot of expectations, or high expectations, I should say, out of their infotainment system, right? They just need to get it done. And instead of physical knobs and buttons, they have this infotainment that can kind of help them kind of navigate through what they need. So I actually think the ID4 and the ID6 will do pretty well in the US. But the one thing that's challenging for Volkswagen is that the Wall Street Journal article said in 2019 or 2020, they lost 14% of their production.
Right.
And then in 2021, they lost another 7%. Okay. You can't, because your cost base stays the same, right? So now, and when we talk 14 and 7, we're talking hundreds of thousands of cars. So if your team is supporting 3 million cars of production a year and you lose 500,000 units, now your costs are extremely high per vehicle.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to be easy for Volkswagen to move away from the China market.
And going back over to China a little bit, you look at the companies right now that are being impacted most of the Shanghai lockdown are in fact Tesla and Volkswagen. And Volkswagen has a deal, the one in Jilin, in Changchun, it's also shut down. It's been shut down.
Yes.
And I know the other news is the Tesla recall, but Tesla recall in China is just another huge PR win for Tesla, right? If you read the fine print, OTA solves the problem.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, who does that?
I don't think, to me, that just means that Tesla is got many more cars on the road than everybody else.
But I'm sure, I know Elon is partying tonight, but in the back of his mind, I'm sure he's thinking about Shanghai every day. The longer it stays shut down, you know, like he can't say much.
The longer it stays shut down and ramp is slow for Berlin Giga, it's kind of a double whammy, right?
Yeah.
Because the one thing, the saving grace that Tesla has is that it's April and they still have 2 more periods in Q2 to try to make up for it. But let's be clear, based on your inside information, Lei, and me being here, the lockdown in Shanghai is going to be longer than 4 and 8 days. We're talking through the end of April, likely, which is unfortunate.
Right. And it's going to reverberate, right? Throughout, if we talk about the industry, it's going to affect a lot of people.
Yes.
Because even for companies that do have these employees who are kind of on site, they live at the factories, but they can't produce because the supplier down the road, they can't supply the parts. So
yeah, that's kind of what we mentioned, right? Last time it was like, okay, the OEM having the factory open is only one part of the story, right?
Exactly. And Kunshan down few dozen miles from Shanghai is also in lockdown. And Kunshan is a huge component manufacturing hub for not only the Shanghai region, but
and the Shanghai lockdown has sucked all the air out of the room with regards to the seriousness of COVID in China. But we have to remember in Jilin province, all the Germans manufacture up there, Audi, Volkswagen. So if you're really wondering about production output, you got to look at Jilin province as well and see how long they're locked down.
Did you see that recent AmCham survey that
yes,
80% of the executives survey said they expect revenue to be reduced, to drop, and also York Wortkey, right? He sent out that long, I guess, LinkedIn post or something that just say, for Western companies who are so much leaning on planning, that when things just drop, it's just nightmare, right? That's, yeah. We didn't foresee this. Maybe a month ago, we were talking about the start of the war. We weren't ready to talk about the Shanghai lockdown, and now.
And the other thing that we should educate our audience on is that Shanghai actually has a very important port. And there are ships piling up that can't be offloaded because drivers, we're talking people are taking COVID tests every day for 20 days, 30 days. And so
this morning, I saw quite a few my WeChat contacts posting that they were woken up in the middle of the night to do first a antigen test at home, kit, and then followed by another test. Yeah, I can't imagine.
And a lot of this to me and friends here is a bit of a head scratcher. So I'm not sure. I don't want to get into it too much, but this is likely going to last into the summer.
Yeah. Well, Clinton is gone, but I think he was asking a question about Q2 prospects, I don't know. April doesn't look good from so far what it's been like. At least for a lot of companies that have high exposure to Shanghai. BYD may be okay, right? As we said earlier, but it's going to be different for different companies, I'm sure. But overall, it's going to affect. I mean,
and we have to remember that the legacies are going to be more exposed than the startups just because of the volumes that they produce.
Look at the overall vehicle sales that have been reported, right? It's double-digit drops, Q1 numbers. And although these premium like Mercedes and BMW, they do say their EV sales are like 2x, 3x, but the base are so small, right? They never report the numbers.
Sure.
And also you talk about let's say Mustang Mach-E, for example. I wonder what kind of numbers Ford is going to report, because they only report quarterly numbers in China.
Yeah.
Whether they'll report numbers at all, I don't know. For the Mustang Mach-E, I don't know.
And there's a lot of important launches. There's the G9.
Yeah.
There's the L9. There's the Lyric. Yeah. So God bless the sourcing teams and the supply chain teams. So
the L9 reveal was delayed, right? It was April 16, but they delayed it. So
and Xpeng moved their G9 launch to June as well. And everyone's still raising prices. Chery raised it twice in 3 weeks now.
I say, a few weeks ago, we were talking about cloudy with a chance of rain. Now it's not a downpour yet, but it's definitely raining.
Yeah. But this goes to show how the world is flat, right?
Yeah.
What's happening in the Ukraine is affecting, or what's happening in the Ukraine and Russia is affecting the rest of the world. And it's unavoidable, because if they localize production and suppliers and sourcing, there's challenges with that too, right? Because if the euro gets too strong or weak, if USD gets too strong or too weak, then we talk about importing and exporting costs getting higher, right? So there's this balance that needs to be had, especially with the legacy automakers who are producing in multiple countries, multiple regions. They have to look at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, their product portfolio, and then look at their forecast from a global macroeconomic standpoint and make decisions based on that. And like you said, nobody was likely predicting a high probability of Russia invading the Ukraine on January 1st of 2022. And so
nobody's thought of the Shanghai lockdown.
And this, Lei, for sure. For Shanghai to get locked down, it's kind of sort of out of control. Like, Shanghai is so important to China.
Yeah, all this image and being well managed, right?
That veneer has been cracked,
tainted. Yeah,
because it's not just that they lost control; it's that the orderly management of trying to get it back in control is not there, right? Anyways,
and also that announcement from the UK government, right? The tiered proposal on percentage of EVs by a certain year. You saw that, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That was interesting, kind of following a China model.
So, and you and I kind of have some inside information on this stuff. UK is getting aggressive with trying to attract investment into the region. So,
yeah, it's a signal.
Yeah, it's effectively just announcing a commitment.
Yeah, it's come on over.
And we are open for business.
I do plan, by the way, we look forward a little bit. I do plan to check out the New York Auto Show next week, since
nice.
It's pretty close. I mean, 3 hours.
You gonna drive that Buick?
Yeah. And then, check out some of these new brands, right? Indy, Deuce, DUS, VinFast's going to be there. The ID Buzz is going to be there. So
make sure you wear your China EVs and more swag, and maybe get one of the
Of
get one
course
of
I
the
will.
CEOs to come on our show. I'd love to talk to the indie guys, right?
They were at CES, I just realized, but I'd only heard of them recently.
Because the one thing that I complain about is just not enough newbies to compete against the legacies.
Then there's the Hindenburg report out on Mullen, right?
Yeah, I saw that. Every single EV company in the United States has had challenges with their financial statements, right?
Yeah, and look at what's happening with FF, right? They've been quiet, I guess, a little bit more recently because they still haven't posted the numbers yet.
And I'm going to be quite frank, and I could be totally wrong. I doubt it, but Jia Yueting is Chinese. He could get away with a lot of that stuff in the past in China, but the level of scrutiny in the United States, the Chinese managers aren't used to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was a entrepreneurial success story in China. He's just become this P.T. Barnum a little bit, right? Making these bold promises. And like Elon said, making that first prototype is easy. That's nothing. So, but that's where you and I should probably go meet these guys and see how we can help them. Some of these startups, because I'd love to help a startup in the United States figure stuff out.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.